How does travel and non-native EMF impact your metabolism and your ability to digest and break down food and nutrients? And let's talk more about diet. What about keto and carnivore diets? And what are some negative things that Dr. Sara Pugh and I have seen on different lab tests on ourselves and clinically working with clients? Today, I am releasing part one of the full episode with Dr. Pugh. I was asked multiple times in comments on YouTube recently to release the full episode. So I'm releasing it in chunks. It's 2 hours long. So today is hour one, and next week will be hour two. Again, if you want to listen to it all in one, you can always join my private membership group. Just go to sarahkleinerwellness.com and select membership group. And that is posted there in the group if you want to watch the full episode all at once. Otherwise, if you are listening to this over on Apple or Spotify, make sure to subscribe. And if you're on YouTube, make sure you are subscribed to get the next episode next week, where we dive more into nutrition, weight loss, and even talk a little bit about hydrogen and Dr. Sara Pugh's experience with hydrogen while she was here in the US. This is a really fun conversation between two friends. We kind of forgot that we were even recording after about half an hour. We just kind of let it rip. So pull up a chair, pour yourself something nice to drink, maybe a sparkling glass of mineral structured water, and let's talk. Thanks so much for watching. Let's get into the conversation. A lot of people are quick to talk about the benefits of sunlight, but what gets often missed in the conversation is the benefit of darkness and the importance of protecting yourself from blue and green light after sunset. That is why I choose Viva Rays as my go-to source for protecting my circadian rhythms. You can use the code YOGI to save 15% off at Viva Rays. Now, you may have seen some of these studies popping up. I call them fear mongering about blue blockers not being effective. And that is a partial truth, because when you use blue blockers that are clear or that have not been tested with a spectrometer to actually block what they say they do, they will not protect your circadian rhythms. And they are not catching those key wavelengths that you need to be blocking in order for your body to be able to repair, for you to make melatonin, which is a master antioxidant. And artificial light at night has been in the scientific literature extensively linked to a host of hormonal cancers, obesity, diabetes, and all sorts of metabolic issues. That, again, is why I choose Viva Rays as my go-to source for protecting my circadian rhythms to allow my body to get adequate darkness at night. You can use the code YOGI to save 15% over at Viva Rays, and you can actually trust that they block the frequencies of light that they say they do. Thanks to Viva Rays for sponsoring today's podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Sara and I have decided we're going to do a little recap conversation. We're going to talk about all the things today. You just got back to the UK. It's been a week ago now, which is crazy. That time just goes that fast. But you were here from the beginning of April until Memorial Day. So a solid 2 months that you were here. So we're just going to talk about all the things.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because there's so many things like quantum and otherwise. I mean, people probably know that Atlanta's going to host the World Cup, the soccer. And my dad, first thing he said was, they haven't met our football hooligans, but he means the English ones, because Wales never qualify for the World Cup, although they're just as bad. So yes, it's something that it's a really interesting place to go. But I think also there's a lot of talk about sun exposure and having to move to lower latitudes, and people being worried because they can't move or don't want to.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot to be said about, I think, obviously I had to get home for other reasons, but it was getting like so hot that it was becoming problematic to go outside. And also the burn risk was high. And I don't know what my skin type is. It's probably like a Fitzpatrick 2.5 or 3. And even I was like wary. I just thought if I went for a walk and got caught in this would not be good.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. And also there's a lot we can say, because I think from my posts, people know that Quest is about 10 minutes away. So I really capitalized on that for lab tests. And in the UK, we do have testing places, but it's kind of really it's not something that British people do as much, but I think there's no reason to, because I'm so much now about helping or teaching people to just be independent or think for themselves. And
Yeah.
I think our favorite phrase this time was, there isn't a protocol.
Yeah, because that's what everyone wants. I mean, that's what sells is like, I'm going to give you a specific protocol for this. And I'm like, no, there, I think there's guidelines that people can follow, but protocols are very individual and something that you have to figure out for you that also fits into your lifestyle and where you live and your particular goals. And so the protocol thing is, it gets old after a while, you know?
Oh yeah, definitely. But I think there's lots of things we could talk about, because again, it was my second trip to see you and the family, and it was definitely much better this time. Not that it was bad last time, but I think a lot of it was because your
Well,
daughter was so much better.
yeah.
And I think that was it was really nice for me to see that, because I know that we've gone all year, especially, have gone down so many rabbit holes for her, and
Mhm.
you could write a whole book on what didn't work, but then you
Mhm.
also found things that do really help and work for her. So it was nice to get to know her on a more deep level.
Yeah.
So for
Yeah.
people who don't know, her daughter is a non-verbal, as we'd say, autistic. However, she can use a letterboard, and she is one of the funniest. There's the person in the letterboard with the humor is just on another level. And I think
Mhm.
that's one thing that it is bigger in the US than it is in the UK. The idea of people who parents think the children can't speak for 20 years maybe, or whatever, and it turns out that there are things called letterboards. And I can't remember the name of the dad, the DJ. He's famous in the UK. His son called Murray is a non-verbal. I'll remember as soon as this is finished. But I think people may be aware of it. But I've spoken to people who have children that can't talk, and they hadn't never heard of a letterboard.
Yeah.
So yes, it was.
Yeah, I mean, it was, and a lot of the people that do this kind of technique with their kids, like Alexis, they say that the kids are non-speaking, but they're not nonverbal, because if they
Mm,
were nonverbal, they would not be able to actually have words in their head. So they call them non-speakers. Um, but yeah, it's something that we didn't discover until she was 9.
mm.
And it was kind of like, yeah, it was shocking when she was able to, at 9 years old, without anyone ever teaching her directly, like any sort of language arts. Like I had been reading to her because I just had this suspicion. I'm like, she knows everything that I'm saying. And so I would read books to her aloud, and she would actually just kind of hang out and listen. And when we started doing the letter boards, this all the things I had read to her, she was wanting to discuss with me on the board. She knew how to spell words like she said, I wanted to make bracelets. And I said, okay, well, what color should we of the thread should we get to make these bracelets? And she spells vermilion at 9. And I'm like, what the heck is vermilion? Like, so a lot of these kids are just kind of trapped in their
Mm.
bodies. And as a parent, when you find out that their whole life that they have had everything going on, like I knew for years, I fought with the school, with everybody. I said, I'm not going to give her an intellectually disabled diagnosis. I will not allow that, because she's not. She's brilliant, but we just haven't been able to tap into it yet. And so, yeah, then when she got on the board, she proved everybody wrong. And so I think a lot of the kids that are classified as like nonverbal and low IQ, I really feel like they could be tapped into, and they are in there, and there is a person in there. And it's kind of devastating when you think about it, of how many kids are just kind of being pushed out and not helped. But yeah, all we can do is keep having conversations like this and hope that people know that this sort of thing is out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think with your daughter Alexis, because I've done hypnosis, which is working a lot actually non-verbally, and also from the age of, I think, yeah, it would have been 17 till 20. I always worked in seniors' homes, and there was lots of people who had dementia, and they still can pick up on your emotional energy and your mood and
Oh yeah.
non-verbal signals. And also anybody who's worked with dementia or children, I have met lots of other children like Alexis. They can be incredibly violent, and it's not their fault, including seniors who've got dementia. And I never have been attacked or bitten or punched or anything. And when I worked in the seniors home, it did happen a lot. So again, there is like another level of how humans can interact, and also it's about always being calm. And if I went into the seniors home in a bad mood, even if they can't talk or people think they've got no idea what's going on, they know. And the
Mhm.
same again, because Alexis is a whole different category there, because I think the non-speakings are really good description, because her level of understanding and what she picks up on is we don't know enough, because like you were saying, I think if she could get a typewriter to type, or something where whatever she wants to say, maybe AI or something in the future will be able to speed up the process, I think it would be really helpful, because it must be really frustrating for her to have to do one letter at a time. It's a bit like
Mhm.
my dad writing a text.
Mhm.
So I think there's a lot, even though AI does scare me a bit, I think for things like this, there's going to be something which will be able to unlock a lot of people. I mean, especially the children, and
Yeah.
other situations where people have somehow got locked in the body. Because I know there are people who sometimes go into a coma and then they wake up and they're not who they used to be, and stuff happens. So I think there's a lot more. And Dr. Stephanie
Yeah.
Seneff was once talking to me about it's the brain in hibernation, and that's also for people on the autism spectrum, because I'm talking about it's very difficult to talk about autism now, because there used to be Asperger's, and I've got friends who will say, oh, my son's on the spectrum, but he's at college. And then there are people like who I've worked with, I won't say names or anything, where the children would literally jump around the house on a trampoline flapping, and it's
It's
something
different.
yeah,
It's
it's
different.
different for certain. And what we're referring to with Alexis is somebody who people who do have somebody like this will know exactly what we mean. And we're not, and we have full respect for other people who are on the spectrum and do things. That's great. But yeah, I think for Alexis just to be able to type, that would be massive.
Yeah. And I mean, we're working towards it. It's just she's been really sick over the last year. Her health has been the biggest thing. And that's why you came initially, is because we were in crisis, and everything. I've talked about it on a solo Q&A episode in the last 6 weeks or so. I think I did that one. I mean, everything was just like at crisis level after
Mm.
she had that life-threatening seizure back in August. And seizures were new for her last year. Like everything last year in 2022 just went bonkers. And at the same time, you and I had started to you were helping me with my membership group, and we were just becoming friends. And then everything went crazy when she was in the ICU, and we were talking every day. And then it got to the point where things were so out of hand. I was like fleeing the house with the baby. It was just awful. And then you were like, okay, I'm coming. And at first, my husband was like, no, we
Oh no, we could write an entire comedy series about your husband.
I know.
It's like also about my parents, but like I don't think either of them watch our channel, but you never
No.
know, they
Mm-mm.
might do.
No. Yeah, Matt was like, is she a serial killer that she wants to just come to our house from the UK? Like, who would do that?
Yeah, but also when I told my mum, she pretty much said, "But what if you get what if they're trying to ensnare you and then they kill you and take all of your possessions?" I was like, uh, 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 um, "How are they supposed to get my possessions in a different?" And I was like, "Anyway,
Country.
whatever." Yeah, and it's like, but then my dad was just saying, "Well, what's the point of you two always just talking to each other on the phone? Just go, and if it's
Yeah.
terrible, just buy a flight and come home."
Yeah.
And then it's one of these things, I think a lot of it, there's so much we can talk about mindset, about sometimes you've just got to just take a leap. And some of the most frightening doors, like it was frightening for both of us, the Atlanta thing,
Yeah.
the biggest leap is actually some of the most fruitful things that you'll find. Because and I often just don't tell people I'm going to do, I just do it, because they'll just say don't. and
Yeah.
and so many people I know who really want to do something, it could be a business, it could be an extreme sport, anything. Other people um you know, pull them back. And I think for a lot of people, you just have to just jump sometimes and
Mm-hmm.
just take the chance and see what happens. Because, you know, sometimes the scariest thing is actually one of the most life-changing events of your life. And then, you know, a
Definitely.
lot more becomes, you know, you become less like afraid of stuff. Because definitely, I think after that experience, it, you know, I kind of really found myself. So I just thought, if I can completely live here and be happy and laugh and do my business and find peace and bliss, I can deal with anything.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was interesting, but also it's for you as well, because you know, to have somebody you don't know come and live with you with your children is like, you know, people be, you know, like maybe your husband, what if somebody's a murderer? But then sometimes you just have to take a chance. And also, like I
And
often
they
said,
weren't. I mean, I
yeah.
never thought that for a second, but Matt, Matt's skeptical of everybody when he's my husband and he's been around me with all of my harebrained schemes or whatever, not schemes, but just things that I've tried and whole stance on hydrogen tablets. I loved them. And then I talked to Greg and he was like, never. And then I talked with Carrie and she's like, well,
Mm,
there's, I've talked to a lot of different practitioners and then I'm going to have Tyler LeBaron on the podcast in a couple of weeks. And it's like, I think that you can use them on like airplanes. I think that they can be used. I think there are some brands that don't have a bunch of heavy metals in them. I think they're okay. And if I was on a flight, I would definitely bring hydrogen tablets. Now, if I wanted to use hydrogen therapeutically, I would not rely upon tablets as a like a day-to-day thing because it would just be really expensive. And then I think a lot of the hydrogen benefits are from inhalation, not necessarily drinking. But I think the drinking can really help down with a lot of the oxidative stress that your body experiences on an airplane. And there's some interesting studies that show protection from non-native EMF. And so, yeah, I would still do the tablets on a plane for sure.
yeah, and we've tested so many different kinds of methylene blue, and
Mm-hmm.
the Troches, you know, as much as like I go crazy because I hate spending money, they are really
The
good. And
transcriptions,
yes, yeah,
yeah. I
that's
think
it.
my
Yeah.
code there is Sarah with an H because I just bought a bunch of them too because I love doing and I don't put them in my mouth like I don't know if you do that, but you can swallow those and still get the same effect because I just don't want to turn my mouth all blue because then I can't like it just I don't want to look like a Smurf. But I find those to be just as effective, just you swallow the troche. I don't know
Yeah,
about
but
you,
yeah, it'd be
Phil.
more like you'd eaten a Smurf. But
Right.
anyway, yeah, I think it's one of those things that there's also there are other ways you can get. I've seen methylene blue in capsules for the same thing, because
Mm-hmm.
it can stain certain crowns, like
Mm-hmm.
dental. It doesn't
Dental.
stain teeth, because I've
No.
done so many experiments with it and gone really blue, and it's all just disappeared somehow the next day, including on
Yeah.
my skin.
Yeah.
And then there's like Compass Labs, which I've used for ages. That's for the US, and there's Mito Labs in the UK. That's a 1% solution.
Mm.
And I do find that it does something, and I've tested like so many different dosages for different
Yeah.
reasons, but then I never take it for very long, because it sort of works for me for like 2 or 3 days, and then I
Yeah.
just get pissed off and irritated and I have to stop it, and that's the
It's
same
not an
for.
everyday
Mm.
type of a supplement. Like that's the thing. I maybe use it once every 3 weeks or so. I'll use it. Like if it's the week before my period right now, and I was just feeling yesterday like I cannot get anything done. I just had this like brain fog, just like I can't get things done. So I popped a troche, laid out in the sun, got really nice and sweaty, jumped in the cold plunge tub, and then boom, my productivity was like through the roof. But I had to give myself some support because there's some interesting studies about methylene blue and red light therapy. So obviously, you get red light infrared from being laying out in the sunlight. So I think sunlight and methylene blue is a powerful combo, or red light panel, red light therapy, and methylene blue that can be also helpful for people if they need like a little boost.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's actually a study on that, because when I was looking into things around the time of the pandemic, there was lots of studies on different kinds of red light, near
Yeah.
infrared, just going
Yep.
outside, and certain infectious agents, and then there was like things which you could back on, and then actually methylene blue is been used as an anti-malarial. There's
Mm.
like hundreds of papers on it. It is a really interesting molecule, and I think he's called Harry Rhodes. That he's a UK inventor, and
Is that the
I won't.
podcast you sent me?
Oh yes, was it Harry Rhodes? It sounds
Was it?
like Harold Tears all over again, and talking
Yeah.
about the ether. He talks about methylene blue as well, and I think
Yeah.
it's one of these things that some people don't approve of it and others do. And I'm very much these days about I don't there are certain things I will tell people what to do, and other
Hmm.
times you just have to continually get information from different sources, and I'd say
Hmm.
methylene blue is one of those. That there's so many different dosages. You have to be a bit careful, because some of the dosages quoted are for IV methylene blue, and
Yeah.
that's a whole totally different thing, and
Yeah.
you have to sometimes read the publication really carefully, because sometimes it
Yes.
was an IV, and I've never tried that. I'd be curious, I'd like
Yeah.
to, but I think
I know
definitely.
somebody here who does that. If next time you come back, we could try it.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
that's the other thing to do with travel. Last time I back to the travel, there's a place you reminded me. There's a place that I sometimes go to that does 5 passes of ozone, and also
Ozone.
then
Yeah. Yep.
and you can ask them to put other things in a drip. So
Mhm.
I'm not a fan of B vitamins synthetic at all. So they
No.
do magnesium sulfate, and you can put glutathione in, and
Mhm.
alpha
Yeah.
lipoic acid, and vitamin C is another one that I'm a
Mhm.
bit, okay, ascorbic acid is very, that's not natural, but there are studies. And, I do think if you build the correct kind of, I'd say if somebody was interested, just the ozone on its own, it
Mhm.
just happens to be the place I go. I've known them, and they sometimes have all new things to try in the IV, and with glutathione, it's one of those things that it's got a half-life of 5 minutes. So
Mhm.
I think it does do something, but it's like methylene blue. If you take glutathione all the time, the liposomal version, even though it might do something, it can affect piezoelectrics in the cell, and it does a dance with vitamin C. And I think it's one of those supplements that I used to find, I thought it was really good, and
Mhm.
now I've kind of thought there's a time and a place, and I think it's just one of those things. Taking it every day is very expensive. But
And it could lose efficacy, I think. I'm somebody who likes to pulse things in
mm,
occasionally. Like, all right, let's do that for a week or 2 weeks and then pull it out, because if there's a way that either number one, your body can make it endogenously,
mm.
or two, you can get it from food to take the supplement form as a long-term thing, then I don't think that serves you. You should look for nutrition or how to support your body's own endogenous production of something
Oh,
rather
oh,
than being
definitely.
reliant on it. Yeah.
And also with the glutathione, because it needs to be put into liposomes, and it's
Hmm.
very unstable. So I did buy some, because I was going to do an experiment with you, but it never arrived. And even if it had done, it would have sat in the sweaty post for a week, so it would have been useless. Because
Yeah.
if you buy glutathione in this country, you can get a place that sells it, and it always arrives on ice.
Old. Yeah.
So that's the other caveat with glutathione. So yeah, I think it's one of those things that I'm interested in, because I know if you deplete your deuterium either naturally or sometimes even with the water, that can raise glutathione, and fasting
Mm.
raises glutathione as well.
Hmm.
But also, I think it's a lot. What I've learned now is, rather than raising all these things in my body, take away the stuff that the glutathione wants to bind to. So in detox pathways, things like glutathione methyl groups, there's glucuronidation. It's all for processing medication, supplements,
Mm.
toxins, your own toxins. So it's one of these things. If you can just put less in for all of these molecules to have to deal with,
Right.
then your methylation problems and all of these other problems go away, because you've taken away the thing they're trying to sort of bind. And anything, even like say B vitamin supplements or
Hmm.
CBD or medicinal mushrooms, your liver still has to deal with them, and it's still got to
Yep.
use methyl groups or
Yep.
metals. It tends to be glutathione that conjugates to things like mercury and stuff like that,
Hmm.
because we are going to talk about HTMA panels and
Oh, yeah.
blood and mercury and stuff like that later. So I've just found that sometimes just lessening the burden on myself, because I do have enough of my own, rather than constantly trying to put more in on top,
Hmm.
because it doesn't work. So that was something I used to use on a flight, because Dr. Chris Shade is kind of a liposome expert, and he kind of drinks a whole bottle, but then it's his product and he can afford to. And then other things on the airplane I found useful, and consistently I've tried this over and over, is the wizard juice.
Oh yeah.
It's the neural RX, very
Neural,
specifically that
yeah.
one, because
Yeah.
it's the MCT that's conjugated to C60, so it's a lipofullerene. And I've had lots of arguments with people online about C60, because the
Mhm.
interesting thing about it is it can't get into cells properly unless it's joined onto a lipid. And if you attach it to an MCT or a different one from Wizard Science, the oleic acid just goes into different places.
Mm.
And you've had Ian on your podcast, and he's like a polymath, and he's like been a massive help to both of us
Mhm.
in his own way. So yes, I have found that to be consistently good, because I remember when I got to yours, and like I did have a amount of jet lag, I should say, or confusion, and I was like, right, I'm just raiding the wizard juice. And then so
Mhm.
I replaced yours, because and then I've tried all the products, and
Yeah.
I just go back to that one.
Yeah, because we tried the Mito
Oh
Pure. Is that the
yeah, I
one?
didn't, yeah, I know, it was all
I didn't
right.
really feel anything because it's what it has
No.
a little bit of methylene blue in it. I can't remember.
Urolithin A, and it's got PQQ. And I was, I wouldn't, if somebody offered it to me, I'd accept it, but I wouldn't rebuy it.
I didn't feel a huge difference from that one. I
No.
was just kind of like, okay, but and it's pricey. So I mean, and you and I both like I buy the Neural RX, the
Yeah.
C60, and we use that here. Not every day, but I think it's good for Alexis. I use it if I'm feeling kind of like brain foggy. I'll use it,
Mm,
but I don't think you should use those things like every single day.
no.
That's the thing. People like we were just talking about earlier, protocols. I want a protocol. Like, so I know I'm jumping all over the place. If we had to create I'm going to fly on a plane protocol. I'm actually going to fly to Miami in 2 weeks. Down one day and back the next day to do a podcast with someone. I'm going to do methylene blue. I'm not going to probably buy any non-native EMF clothing just because it's like, I don't know. Um, but I'll do the methylene blue. I will bring some hydrogen tablets on the plane and blue blockers. And that's probably the extent of what I will do. When I get down there, I have a hotel that's at the beach. So I'll probably try to go straight to the beach, do some grounding, jump in the water. Um, yeah, that's the plan. And obviously I'll fast on the flight. It's only like a 2-hour flight, but I think
Mm.
fasting on a long flight, I think is really, really important for people. Why would you say, if you could explain that to people? Because I know we're getting a lot of summer travel right now. Um,
Um, First of all, because your blood sugar gets so dysregulated, because no matter what, you're either sitting in an airplane, which is like a microwave, or a tube of farts, as some people would say, and it's just a terrible environment, and it's
mhm,
just a massive stress on your body. So
mhm,
even though the mitochondria may not make as much water as they would if you were keto or fasting, not in an airplane, it's going to be better than if you're eating carbs, or
mhm.
I'd actually say any food,
Snacking.
because yeah, because food actually, as much as it's really important, but it's inherently inflammatory to have to digest anything, even if it's
Mhm.
nutritious. So
Keto. Yeah.
yeah, so I just think if you just don't put anything in there, it's just less burden on the body to have to deal with.
Yeah.
And then also all of that environment really inhibits your autophagy, and you really need that. Because we do the most autophagy, which is sort of the cells dealing with trash, as just we'll say in simple terms, and repairing the mitochondria. And it just gets really hampered with bad circadian rhythm, or flights, or jet lag.
Mhm,
So like I was saying before, fasting sort of stimulates the NRF2 pathway, which sort of ties into glutathione and all sorts of other pathways to do with autophagy. And I just think it's just easier, because like the more I learn, the more I'm looking for 80/20s of how do
mhm,
I make this simple, because not
mhm,
everything works, and I'm really open-minded to everything, but I can also be really analytical.
mhm,
And sometimes it's just better to bin stuff that's all right and just go
mhm.
for the good stuff in each category.
Yep.
So I would just say fasting is just, it's just makes it simple.
Yeah.
And there's no temptation. It's easier to regulate um your blood sugar. And also I just carry on the fast when I get to my
Yeah.
destination, because the blood sugar is kind of still going to take a while to settle, although there may be people who would want a small keto meal. But I would just say, just be really careful of
Hmm.
carbs. Like when I flew to Vietnam, I was so excited about the local and seasonal fruit. I just ate it too early once I'd got there. And this is another question people ask a lot, about eating what when you arrive
Yeah.
somewhere, so we
I
can
say
move into
wait
that.
48 hours, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't just dive right into it. If you're going to, Costa Rica, don't jump off the plane and go straight for the pina colada and all that stuff. That's a really bad way to help your body adjust. I would stay fasted, eat something, sleep that night, fasted if you can. Some people are not going to have that level of fat adaptation and they may be stressing, eat something that's fat and protein nourishing, but wait 48 hours until you have properly grounded, set yourself to the sun of that environment, touch the earth, maybe jumped in a body of water if there is one available. Obviously, here there's not, but yeah. And then you can slowly start to eat what's available. Unless you're like extremely leptin resistant and you're actively trying to reverse that, then that's where you may want to be a little bit more cautious, right? And not just go all out with what's local and seasonal.
Oh yeah, definitely. And that's the thing I was just going to say, that on my arrival I always ground somewhere, and then
Hmm.
it's actually easier to go from the UK to the US, just because, especially where you are, because the light cycles are much easier to manage, because
Hmm.
the UK, it's something like 4:40 in the morning until probably 9:30. That's our
Hmm.
daytime, whereas yours, it's probably, is it like 6:15 till sort
Yeah,
of
it's
8:30 or
so we've
something?
got the solstice coming up in a couple of weeks, and I think the earliest the sun will come up this during solstice is like 6:15 or so, and then it sets at like 8:45 at the latest. But then
Yeah.
it'll right now I think it's at 6:30 that it's rising, and then sunsets at 8:30. But it'll speed up to solstice, and then it'll go back down. So it's not bad here at the 33rd latitude. I feel bad for the people who live in these like extreme northern environments, but then it's, when it's the middle of winter, you're not getting sunrise until like 8:39 in the morning, like it's late that'll come up, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. But I think a lot of it, I've just learned how to live in this country, because I was thinking um, about this idea of experiencing a winter, because it's actually really good for you to have a summer and a
Mm-hmm.
distinct winter and
Mm-hmm.
cold. And T.S. Wiley she's a very interesting
Mm-hmm.
polymath lady, and she was talking about one of the reasons people age is because if you make an artificial summer in winter, by not observing proper circadian rhythms, you've basically told your body you've had two summers. So
Mm-hmm.
some clock inside you counts that as 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So even though
Ah, very interesting. I like that.
yes, yeah. So even though in this country I didn't leave it for like I won't go into the details. I think it was from about 2004 till something like, I can't remember. I didn't go out of it for ages, and then I always used to spend a lot of time outside, and we do have nice weather here. But I always cycled everywhere or walked, and like I was saying, I hate spending money, so I didn't bother to turn heating on. So I always had the experience of a summer, and then a proper winter. So, because a lot of people ask about, is it a good idea to, because I'm half New Zealander, so I could technically just bugger off to New Zealand every time it's winter here and have
Mm-hmm.
a summer there. But part of me is kind of thinking, actually, it's okay to go and do that, say for say 2 or 3 weeks, because there's lots of benefits of vitamin D and mood and
Mm-hmm.
everything. But I think if you constantly kind of try and have, run away from the winter, there could be, what we should say, unforeseen consequences, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a reason why climates are the way they are, that people have adapted and lived in certain environments for as long as they have. And I think this whole like, you have to live at the equator, you have to escape the winter. I think it's poor, like a poor idea, just because there are so many benefits to darkness, to
Mm,
cold, for the mitochondria. Just like there's a lot of benefits to light. People just want to go straight for the sunlight for this because it feels good, but we've discussed this a lot. There is probably a lot more magnetism where you
Mm.
live up in Leeds, where the UV index doesn't get, I mean, it's today here it gets to be like a 12, I think.
Oh yeah, it's a 7 today, but
Right.
that's the other really important thing that I was looking. I went in the massive vitamin D rabbit hole. That
Hmm.
there comes a
Hmm.
point where if you try and force more sun on you, the whole system just shuts down. It won't make anything. Like I discovered when I was at yours.
Hmm.
Remember that time I thought, oh yes, it's gonna have gone up like 15
Yeah,
points,
we were like
and
laying out
bugger
in the
all
sun
happened. Yeah.
constantly, and it went up what, like 1 point maybe?
Yeah, but I
Yeah,
was only measuring the storage because I hadn't
right.
tapped into measuring the active D then. So when I like cottoned on, the next time round I measured both, and then I measured both again, and I did work out that my vitamin A to storage vitamin D, sorry, to active D is the right ratio. So a lot of the time with the body, I've learned now, don't look at numbers, look at ratios. And this is like when we talk about the HTMA test, where people
Mm-hmm.
look at absolutes. I was beginning to wonder because there's like nothing wrong with me. I don't have any like symptoms, and I ran loads of other labs. I was looking for, I want something else to, why is this vitamin D doing this? And
Mm-hmm.
then I went in a big deep dive, and it just said that if you try and force all that UV on you, and your body's got plenty of the active, and you've got plenty in storage, because the storage vitamin D isn't meant to be in my blood. It could be in my muscles, it could be in
Right.
my
That's
fat, it could be in my liver. And I got to the point where I suddenly thought, hang on, um I'm trying to have a battle with something that probably is pointless, because
mm-hmm.
like you say, when we do our own sun activities, like we do it, like Jack Cruz would be proud, and it's like there isn't anything, my magnesium was not brilliant, but it wasn't horrific. It was like in range. And I know if you've got low red blood cell magnesium, then you can't make vitamin D
Right.
properly.
Right.
I do have some SNPs, but I've made a lot more vitamin D in places where the UVI is 7 to about 9. So I think comes the point where you can overload it. And I think we've talked a lot about nipping in and out of the sun as well. For
Mm-hmm.
some
Yeah.
people,
Oh, I
can be
have
really
to now.
helpful.
I don't think you should just be out there for like an hour straight. Like I mean now because it's so hot and the UV
Mm,
index is so high, like I have to go in 10 minutes, go back inside, drink some
mm.
hydrogen water, go back out. Or I'll go like I did yesterday. I laid out, I got covered in sweat in like 15 minutes, jumped in the cold plunge, and then went back out and then got covered in sweat, went back in the cold plunge. Like it was a lot of fun actually, but um
What you're doing is kind of a Fournier effect. It's sort of like a contrast therapy, but instead of
mhm,
using a sauna, you're using
sun.
UV and
Yeah.
sun. And that can be really helpful for metabolism,
Yeah.
because that's the other
Definitely.
thing that I found really interesting in Georgia, because I ran lots of leptin. I think I ran it 3
Mhm.
times actually. And I was actually scared of, I didn't know how to reintroduce carbs properly, because obviously my brain thought it was still May, although
Mm.
my biology was like, well, hang on a minute, this looks like the middle of summer to the
Right.
UK, because the weather in May in Georgia is how if we have a good summer would be in August.
Wow.
So it's one of these things that, but also again, my biology would know I was in a different location, because I did
Mhm.
that much grounding, because I hardly wore any shoes, and
You were grounding all the
I had
time.
to buy a standing desk for working, because there was loads of effing and being over the laptop, and I was like, right, I'm not using it anymore. And so my body didn't know I was in a different location. I think that's something that a lot of people always ask me questions about, is about which carbs to
Right.
introduce.
Right.
And like, for keeping stuff simple, didn't we kind of narrow it down to just say the baked apples and honey? That's what I found, for a treat. Say if you wanted a treat, because that's the other question people
You and Matt likes
ask all the
honey. I
time.
don't do honey. Like I just
No.
like it repels me. I'm like, "Ooh, I don't want to do honey at all." Like I don't know. I have never experimented with honey. I know a lot of people do. But if I'm gonna do carbs, it's baked apples. I'll do because I make the little potatoes for James. So I'll boil the potatoes, put them in the fridge, kind of do like a resistant starch type of deal with the potatoes. Squashes, we did get
Oh
that.
yes, yeah, we like squash. Yes.
James loved the spaghetti squash as a ball to roll down the hill and explode. And we
But
did.
I still ate it afterwards.
Yeah,
And
you did.
also,
We didn't waste it.
no. And then also I really liked the giant watermelons, and
Yeah, the giant
it was
watermelon.
so massive I had to freeze it,
Yeah.
because it was like, well, okay, idiots, now what are you going to do with this thing? Because it won't
Yeah.
fit in your, we've got a video of James rolling it down the hill, and it's like probably weighs, I don't know, 5 or 6 or 7 Jameses anyway.
Yeah.
So that I found the frozen watermelon, because it's um refreshing, but it's not
Mhm.
too much carbs and sugar.
Right. Right. In this,
When
if
I'm not
the
used to
UV
it.
index is like 11, 12, you can stand outside grounded in the middle of that and have the watermelon, I think, and not have the same blood sugar impact than you would if maybe you were upstairs with all the windows closed eating it, in April. It's different. I feel like when the UV index is higher, your body, and you're outside eating it, then you're obviously, we have the studies to show what light does to blood sugar.
Mhm.
But yeah, there's context, because I know a lot of people kind of are on both of our channels that are of keto, of carnivore, and like what we're talking about right now is like absolute friggin' blasphemy to talk about foods that are not meat. But you and I have at the same time, we have worked with probably thousands of people at this point, and we see the nuance, and we see like the seasonality and how sunlight actually comes into the equation and can make your body more insulin sensitive, or the lack of it, more insulin resistant. And that, this is the one thing I wanted you to talk about is uh, trying to be carnivore or trying to be very strict keto in this environment where there is a lot of UV. For me, I struggled so hard. I mean, when I look back at my carnivore pictures of when I did a 7-day water fast, and I just was like trying so hard to just like make my body adapt to this no carb carnivore, and my body was just fighting me in all regards during the middle of the summer doing that. And I just didn't get it. I just thought, well, maybe it's me. But I'd love for you to just expand on that, the strict keto, strict carnivore in a high UV area, and your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think just in simplicity, because it's summer, the body expects abundance, and also thyroid hormone varies
That's the
throughout the
thing, is a
year.
thyroid hormone. It changes in summer versus winter, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And also,
And the
it's just,
microbiome.
yeah, absolutely. And also, I've run so many thyroid labs and like gone mad at them and shown you, and
Mm-hmm.
gone madder. Then got found Quest, where I can run things like thyroid uptake and calcium, because calcium is a big thing that people miss with low thyroid. But I
Oh,
just think
yeah.
from just a basic thing, it's sort of, I've given up fighting Mother Nature now, and if the things are growing, my physiology knows they're there, and you do need an amount of carbohydrate for certain thyroid conversion reactions, but also it's just something I've done it myself, and I went to this conference once, and it was a keto conference, and I was being super strict keto, and just the level of mania was just on another level. And I really
Hmm.
appreciate the people like Dr. Jen Unwin and Dr. Ian Lake, who were really kind and patient with me, and Beth Zupek Kenya, who were just like, okay, you're obviously completely insane, but I'm just going to give you a chance. So I'll always remember that, because when people are really kind to you when you're in a terrible place, it means a
Hmm.
lot, because
Yeah.
obviously there are people who love to kick you, or people kick people by accident when they're down,
Hmm.
like trolls on the internet, because they
Hmm.
obviously don't know what's gone on in your life or my life, or what your
Hmm.
daughter or son have done. And it's
Hmm.
like, okay,
Yeah,
I
like the
really,
woman the other day with the
oh
hydrogen
no,
comment,
yeah.
and I sent it to you.
Oh yeah, exactly. We'll come back to the hydrogen machine, because that's
Yeah,
something that people have got really angry about. But it's one of those things I'm very much okay. If you don't want to do it, then
don't do
just
it.
don't do it. It's the same with
Don't buy it.
keto. Yeah, don't buy it. And also, just back to carnivore and keto, I think carnivore is really helpful, and keto, because carnivore is very simple, and it can get you started. But you'll just find that you know, a lot of the times it's more for women than men, just because we
Yeah.
tend to have more sensitivity to our thyroid. Back to that again, because that's the other thing, when I had the little bit of antibodies raised and
Oh
stuff.
yeah.
So the whole thyroid thing in women, men do encounter thyroid issues, but women do more so.
Mhm.
And then we have to deal with periods, and that's another
Mhm.
time when, if with carbs and insulin and progesterone and cycles and everything like that, I think you need an amount of carbs there. But then again, always test everything, because I
Yeah.
ran the progesterone and estrogen and testosterone over a cycle. I also ran pregnenolone, DHEA, and DHEAS, and it was like I was showing you, it was like the best period I'd had, because it was perfect of 29 days, and I said, oh, I could have had a baby this month. But again, because that was like the second month I was with you, I'd already found a way to reintroduce carbs that were appropriate, like
Mhm.
again, dairy that's not raw,
Mhm.
because the calcium's been disturbed. That can be a real issue for thyroid, because calcium blocks thyroid uptake into the
Mm.
cell. And if people get a HTMA, just because it shows your calcium
Is
is
low.
low, it doesn't mean anything. It means,
No.
because HTMAs are measuring how much is being excreted, and on HTMA tests you have to read sort of ratios of the main four, like the potassium, sodium, magnesium, and
Yep.
calcium. Even if you just learned how to be an expert in those, that's going to be a massive help for you for, you know, working out what should I eat. And that kind of leads me into the other thing about the slow or the fast metabolism,
Oh,
or the slow or the fast
how many
oxidizer.
times do we get that in our groups of like, I did an HTMA and I have a slow metabolism. And I'm like, no, you don't.
Oh no,
Like,
because I've
doesn't
exactly.
mean you have a slow metabolism. And HTMA is not going to tell you if your metabolism is slow or fast. Like, let's break that down a little bit, because it's a very high point of confusion for people. And then it's like another way for someone to throw up a roadblock for themselves and say, well, I'm just this, nothing's going to work because I have a slow metabolism. I'm like, let's
Oh
not
no,
do.
it's not that. It's to do with being a fast or a slow oxidizer.
Yes.
And it just means that the people who are technically the fast oxidizers just do better on a keto diet or fat. So that might be, people might be saying, oh yeah, but I've done keto and carnivore for 10 years and I just feel amazing. Well, maybe they're a fast oxidizer through and through, because there's always going to be grades of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then somebody who's more on the slow oxidation side, these people tend to gravitate towards the repeat or
Yeah.
the metabolic thing. But then that's a good idea. It's like in theory, but then the weight gain, if you on that, can just be horrendous. And if you do it wrong, all it means
Oh,
is
yeah.
those people are kind of going to find doing cyclical keto or low carb or paleo is going to work for them. But it doesn't mean that they can't do keto or fast. But then, like everything, because these HTMAs depend on hormones and minerals, and those are controlled by light,
Yes.
you can be, you know, you've done a test where one time you're a slow oxidizer and one time you're a fast oxidizer.
Right. I've switched.
But it doesn't, the whole thing about this HTMA test, all it's doing is measuring that at that given time,
Right.
and the how much minerals you got that you
Are
were
burning through.
excreting.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But also I've learned that, and
In
that you
2020, after the world shut down and I had been stressed out and my life
Mhm.
got turned upside down, I was a fast metabolizer.
Yeah.
And then 6 months later, I was all of a sudden a slow metabolizer. I was a fast one and then I was a slow one. So there's like different, like fast 1, 2, 3, slow 1, 2, 3. So you don't really want to get out on the outskirts necessarily.
Mm.
You want to stick more towards the middle, is my understanding. I don't know if that's been your
I,
understanding as
I
well.
just try not to even like give it a label anymore, because
Mm.
I'm just more about looking at the ratios of these minerals, because it's always the same
Mm.
things that are off anyway. And
Sodium, potassium.
yeah, exactly. And there's all different reasons of why people have potassium that's really low. And also, again, people can make it worse by eating a high sodium with low potassium. But
Oh,
this is going
yeah.
to get too complicated. What I'm trying to say is, with a HTMA test, not to neglect the fact that you might it look like low calcium on the HTMA, but that means it's not coming out. So
Right.
And it's a very sort of pivotal part of how thyroid functions. But also, even with a HTMA, it's not like a genetics test. You know, I could
Can change.
yeah, I'm sure whatever, what I would be could potentially be very different when I'm in the UK in winter
Oh yeah.
versus in Georgia in the summer, because like I
Mhm.
was saying, the hormones influence minerals, light influences
Mhm.
hormones, and there's just numerous ways that things that things can change. But again, I think they're really useful if you read them properly. But I
Right.
found you can't do it without the blood minerals.
Mhm.
Again, if you try and just read blood minerals without a HTMA, you can't completely look at the snapshot properly there. But I think it's just something. The reason I brought that up is because people just kind of go crazy over thyroid, and I did for
Mhm.
ages. And
Mhm.
sometimes I thought, well, maybe, yes, leptin's really important. I've, done this, and I wonder what other things I can look at. And that's when I got interested in the calcium. But then a lot of the time, like you just, from experience of working with people and talking to a lot of colleagues, dairy and weight gain is just comes up all the time.
All the
And
time. All the time.
and again, like I was saying, the raw dairy, the calcium behaves itself, whereas in the processed and the unpasteurized and the
Pasteurized.
homogenized, the calcium sort of gets it doesn't behave itself. So again, that shoot up in calcium is just a really lovely recipe to stop the thyroid getting into the cell, and then people gain weight. And also it's inflammatory as well, and
Mm.
that on the deuterium and sort of just general inflammation, HSCRP front is going to block people's sort of weight loss as well.
Yep.
So yeah, that kind of went off on a tangent, but I think what I'm trying to say is that as you know, as I've got older, I've just got more and more. I call it the hap snappigator. I don't snap at you or the kids, but I just get more and more annoyed at people who just present me with one marker and ask
Mhm.
me to tell them why they're ill, or they'll send me
Yeah.
I've had a HTMA, they tell me what's in it without showing me the picture and expect me to be able to fix everything
Right.
and without any other labs. And like
Right.
everything, labs are not the be all and end all, but like I learned by just running my own, and I did everything possible wrong with labs and trying to fix things because it didn't matter, because it was just me, not clients. And then over the years you kind of work out, actually I need all of, I don't always need $5,000 worth of labs. There's plenty you can get from Quest and even from a HTMA, which isn't that expensive.
Mm.
And just you can get a lot out of sort of triglycerides and just basic things, just HbA1cs and all of those basic panels. Because some people have sent me, like somebody once sent me in the post a hard drive full of labs,
Oh
like
God.
everything you could possibly imagine. So I said, "Oh, can you just go and get me a lipid panel and all the glucose thing?" And the triglycerides were in UK units it was something like 1.6, and in the US it was something like 150, and the
Oh.
HbA1c was obviously like insulin resistance level, and they'd spent like
Then
this
that's going to
insane
impact all these other
everything.
labs. That's the thing.
Yes,
Like people don't
exactly.
understand the master hormones, right? So
Yeah.
for A1C is a 5.7, your HSCRP is elevated. We don't even need to necessarily go crazy about all the rest of this stuff until we fix that. That's how leptin is so crucial in these things and with thyroid. And because it's a master hormone, it's going to impact all these other downstream hormones and all these other markers, your triglycerides, all of that stuff. And so people get so caught up in like, oh, look at this marker. And it's like, let's look at the A1C, CRP, leptin, fasting
Mm.
insulin, let's look at those main things. And
And
then,
ferritin as well, because even
oh
just
yeah, you're big
ferritin
into the
by
ferritin
itself.
thing right now.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's just because it's like the calcium, that all minerals are really important, but when there's too much of them in the wrong place, and then there's so much misinformation about iron
Mhm.
and iron overload. And Morley, bless him, literally just gave away goodness knows how many hundreds, if not $1,000 worth of session going through all of my labs.
Mm.
And even if people can just understand that ferritin shouldn't be over 50, because once iron gets in the liver and in places, it interferes with things like thyroid conversion, with
Mm.
sex hormone conversion and stuff like that. And it's just, again, misinformation about where it actually comes from. But then back to the leptin, that's what I'm like. Sometimes I actually really don't know with a person. So I'd rather, why not just keep it really simple and just fix your circadian rhythm? Buy a distill and have clean water. Stop, playing on your phone in the evening, and just wear blue blocks and stop
Mm-hmm.
watching so much TV and
Mm-hmm.
walk more, and maybe just start there. And I have found, even with my own biochemistry, the more I used to fiddle, the worse it got. And then I eventually, like, right, that's it. I'm not buying any more labs now. And I didn't do it for about a year. Then I went back to doing it, and lots of things by themselves seem to have settled back down again. And I also stopped pretty much all supplements, because I got to the point where, despite being a biochemist, I'm just messing things up by adding this and this, and I'm this, like, right, end of it. I'll just leave it all alone and then
Yep.
revisit it later.
Yep. Yeah, I think people just get caught up in, like, they listen to all these different podcasts, they listen to all this different stuff, and they think, like, I'm going to try these 30 different supplements and try this and try that. And the basics of the things that you just mentioned are not being addressed. And so they're just kind of running themselves on this hamster wheel. And there's a certain point that I've gotten to. So I was talking with my husband, I was talking with Matt last night, because he was listening to, because he knows I'm friends with Dr. Tina.
Yeah.
Who's been talking a lot about the GLP-1s, and she was on Dr. Hyman's show with Callie Means, who's a doctor, and kind of debating him on the whole thing. And it's interesting to hear Matt's perspective on all of that. And he still, even after everything, he still thinks it's comes back to simplifying lifestyle, rather than giving people medications. And I'm like, it's always interesting to see how he takes this information in. But he was also like, oh, haven't you listened to this one? Have you been listening to that topic? I'm like, I just don't listen to a lot of stuff anymore, because I like to kind of figure things out and talk to
Yeah.
people. I love talking to people and hearing, how does this actually affect you, rather than, I listened to this podcast that said, I'm like, no, how is that playing out with everyday people? Like,
It,
what does that look like?
Exactly. That's why I ran all those labs, because we had an argument in your house. It must be the house, and I was like, right, okay, well, I'll run labs then.
Yep.
And there was, it's not the house, because there was
No.
kind of, and it's one of those things. It's like everything. I'll just try everything out as well, because
Right.
it is like, I don't expect people to listen to me and do what I say. I expect them to take on board some suggestions and then
Mm-hmm.
get some labs and test for themselves,
Yep.
especially over the food. Because the thing is, people get really angry if I just say stop eating collagen powder and don't eat dairy if you want to lose weight, and get rid of the nuts, because I've
Yeah.
tested it over and over, the whole nuts. Like, I had to hide the pecans from myself. I wasn't intending to eat them. They were purchased
Just
not by
appear.
me. Well, no, you bought them, but I was going to make them into a keto cookie for your daughter, because
Yeah.
I do sometimes cook her treats, and I don't actually eat them, not because there's something wrong with them. It's just, like, it's not really my thing.
Yeah.
And over the nuts, like when they get, and the dreadful peanut butter, that just absolutely no, absolutely no, no, no,
No.
no, no,
No, I
no.
can't.
And I've just learned, and I hardly ever ate it anyway, but I must say Reese's stuff's nice. And I ate, like, some Reese's eggs at Easter and then regretted it, and I didn't have anything. I came to yours, and in this said shop there was, like, all kinds of Reese's things I'd never tried before. So I tried, like, a bit of each one, and then the antibodies got worse. So I was like, right, that's the end. No more
That's
peanut
it.
butter,
No
no
more
more nuts.
tasting.
Yeah, no more tasting, no more peanut butter. And
I
I
think
just
the
left
nuts
left it
can
alone.
actually cause antibodies to go
uh,
up in
oh yeah, but
people.
also I think dairy can
Absolutely.
as well.
Dairy and nuts, that's the thing, I think can cause the antibodies to go up. And like, where that we have gotten to with people, again, because so many people come to my leptin program and to your stuff, and they're like, all right, I want to lose weight. I really want to lose weight. I'm going to go straight to keto. I'm going to go straight to carnivore. And I'm like, stop. No. Like, I've drastically changed my mind about that, because number one, I find that if people are going to try to make that jump like too quickly, it is going to set them up to binge, and it's going to set them up to fail. So I've revamped how I look at food, and I'm like, okay, you want to lose weight, you're getting rid of
Mm.
nuts, seeds, dairy, anything processed, anything that has a label or a freaking commercial on TV, you're not going to eat it. And people are like, it's restrictive. I'm like, I didn't tell you to go carnivore. I didn't tell you to eat
Mm.
butter. I didn't tell you to go keto. I just said, let's get rid of this stuff. It's actually like a confusing signal for your body.
And
Uh,
it's full of heavy metals. The most
full of
heavy
heavy
metals come from processed food, and people are always waffing about the fish
oatmeal.
and
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
filling. Whereas actually, it's the most is processed food, and
Right.
sure there is some in seafood, and I don't deny
But
that
there's
amalgam fillings
selenium
have some.
to balance that
Yeah,
out. And then
but
you stick to the small fish like the salmon roe, oysters, sardines, yeah, that's Michael
or just
Crawford.
test it.
Yeah, exactly.
But also back to the whole thing, like you said about the being restrictive. A
Mhm.
friend of mine said this, and I really like her phrase because she is like me. She likes, I wouldn't say it's horrible food, but it's kind of what people like, things like liver and just meat or fish, or people would call it, oh, you're so boring. And it's like, no,
Mm.
it's to me it's variety. But then
Yep.
my friend said, actually, you shouldn't be eating for entertainment, and I just really
No.
enjoyed that word, and I just really like that phrase because
Yeah.
there
On a
are
daily
people.
basis, I think
Mm.
there's some like joy that can be had from food because
Oh yeah.
we had a couple of times where Matt got Wahoo for us, and that like before you left as something that was fun to do, and we sat at the table with the kids, and it wasn't like horrible food, but it was not something that I would have somebody doing a leptin reset necessarily eating. But I think there is like an enjoyment factor. But you don't want to live your life revolving around food is entertaining me. Like that's the goal, I think, is to separate yourself from I'm eating for enjoyment constantly. I enjoy what
Yeah,
I eat.
or eating for stress or
Right.
emotions, or
Right.
trying to eat carbs to sleep. Because actually,
Oh
the you
yeah.
kind of glossed over that meal. It was much more significant because if anybody knows anything about children in who are like Alexis, trying to sit down and have a family meal, and also when children, because
And James.
James eats the cleanest diet ever on the planet. That we could
Yep.
make a whole episode about that. But obviously, they grab at stuff. So
Oh
so
yeah.
it's all about, actually sitting down and having that meal together without any chaos or somebody crying or throwing
Screaming
something or feeding everything to the
the
dog. And we
dog.
actually we actually did it. So and that's all about having a meal as a family, and it was
Mhm.
fun,
Yeah.
but we wouldn't buy it every day. And the thing is,
No.
it wasn't actually too bad. I mean, there
No.
was I'd never tried grits before, and
Oh
then there was
yeah. The
then
shrimp
there
and grits. I was
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and then there was the burger. Like
Mhm.
I tried the bread the first time we had it, and then I passed
This
because that's
bread
another thing
tasted
with
like donuts. Like, probably
th-
shouldn't
th-
be eating this.
that's another thing for me. I'm just absolutely, if you've got issues or weight issues or just don't have bread, don't
Yeah.
have cakes.
Oh, I know.
That's
Why
why
is
I
that
do.
so hard? Like, oh, what about
Mm,
sourdough bread? The sourdough bread does not have a halo. If you are literally leptin resistant, you're trying to lose weight, your blood sugar, because leptin signals the glucose insulin axis. Let's give your body the best chance possible because bread is not a blood sugar friendly food. I know that a lot of people might disagree with me. But just even sourdough bread, just please, just not, don't. It's not for someone who's like, you're trying to reverse leptin resistance. You're trying to lose weight. Things we should not be eating: bread, oats, nuts and seeds, and dairy. Like those are the things I categorically say eliminate them. Then when you get to like where I'm at right now, like I've gained a little bit of weight since you got to the house because I was looking kind of gaunt when you got here just because stress and life. And I
Oh yeah,
just,
because I've seen everything, obviously. Well, obviously not your mini moo, of course, or anything else, but I have seen. I don't look. I kind of like, oh hi Sarah, how are you? And it's
I
like,
know.
but the whole point, it's like I'm not interested. It's one of those things. It's like, yeah, okay, yes, she's in her whatever's doing her son stuff. I'll just
Oh
go and
yeah.
find
Like
something else to do.
exactly. Yeah. But I mean, I was like super thin when you first got here, and I probably have put on maybe like 5 or 6 pounds, which I kind of needed to. But for me, okay, if I'm
Oh, I
like,
didn't. When did you put it on? Because I didn't notice. That's the
I
other
feel like it was
thing.
like the last week that you were here
I
for
didn't
whatever
notice
reason.
anything. Yeah, exactly. So I think it
I think
like
it
I
was the
don't.
last week you were here. Now I'm like, oh, okay. Everything still fits, but like my clothes were even like my clothes that I bought that were like a size small were like falling off of me. And I was like, this is like too much. It was just, I wasn't intentionally trying to lose weight. It was just like a lot, my kids, life, stress. And that was the cool thing about having you here this time, because I was in the midst of the life stress, kids, all the crazy stuff the first time you came. I mean, kind of hard to describe to people the amount of stress and crazy that was going on that first time you were here. But this time we had fun. Like there was,
Mm.
I feel like joy came back into my life this time that you were here. And so my body was kind of like, okay, let's like, get plumping up. My husband's like, oh, your face looks better. It doesn't look so quite like sunken in.
Oh yeah, well that's another thing about, oh anyway, but men
You
and
want to
weight,
know
they
how
always
really,
men and children, just never involve them in a
don't
conversation
ask.
about your weight. Just
I
don't
don't
say
ask.
it.
I don't ask, but
Yeah.
I will be given the opinion of like, your face looks too thin. Like, he'll tell me. I'm like, okay, thanks. Everyone's like, oh, how do you think, you can get away with not wearing deodorant? Because I don't really wear deodorant. I'm like,
Oh
trust
yeah.
me, if I smell bad, my husband would tell me. Like if I was stinky, he would tell me. Like,
Oh yeah, that's like another subject of food, because I always buy spices
oh yeah, we were
I
riding in
always
the car and I was
like
like, and then
like
you're like,
oh
it's
it's
me.
me, but also it happened with Matt as well, because I don't care, because it's one of those things. I do agree that if you have too, that's why definitely on carnivore, when I do keto and don't with spices, like I don't need deodorant, but this time there's all stuff I had in your cabinet or cupboard from last time. Then I used to like going to the Muslim shop, which
Oh
was even
yeah.
more like weird things
The
and
halal
garlics and
shop. Yeah.
yeah, the
All
halal.
the
Well, it was really
spices.
interesting. They were really nice to me, even though I went in the first time with hardly any clothes on and then
They were
froze in
like,
terror, thinking, oh no, this is so disrespectful. But they were complete, and I didn't realize, I just thought it was a supermarket. But anyway, yeah, that definitely, like, I remember the time it was Matt was like, oh, don't worry, mate, it's me. And Mark, I don't care. But it was one of those things, it's like, then you learn. And I do agree that, there is something to be said about, like I really like garlic and spices. You
mm-hmm.
can end up smelling of them.
Yeah,
So
you
yeah,
definitely
that's
can. Yeah. Just going back to the bread thing is
mm,
like, I'm very leptin sensitive. I almost got to the point of being a little too thin. So yeah, we have a meal that I'm not normally going to eat. If I have a couple of bites of bread, it's not the end of the world, right? It's not, it's okay. It doesn't ruin everything. It doesn't ruin my goals. And that's not why I gained like 6 pounds. It was more like, oh, my body is kind of more relaxed and I do feel like eating a little bit more. When you're stressed out, it's really hard to eat a lot. And it's hard to eat here when the kids are like, the one time we got Wahoo and
I know the wildebeest, yeah.
Matt was all excited about the meal. He's like, oh, he asked us both. He got us both excited about it. I'm gonna get the calamari and we're gonna order this and order that. And we were like, yeah, cool. He's ahi tuna. Like, yeah, okay, cool. And then he gets this, he goes all the way across town to pick it up, brings it back, and the kids are just climbing all over everything, being completely insane, like spamming you. And he's like, I just don't even have an appetite for this. Like, I can't even eat it.
Oh yeah, there was, yeah, exactly. But that's the whole other, there's so many interesting things and emotions attached around food, and
Yeah.
it's
Yep.
one of these really delicate subjects. But I think back
Yeah.
to the bread thing, and
But how
I
many
think
times did you see me eat bread the whole time you were here for 2 months?
oh no, we didn't. And I didn't even eat any cake. I actually, one thing I remember, I bought the space Oreos because I'd
Oh
never
yeah,
seen them
I was like,
before.
what the hell are
The
these?
the blue and pink Oreo, but then I did like the birds
You tried to
enjoyed
feed them
some.
to the birds. Did they eat them or did they just leave
Oh
them?
no, they the thing is, I got the birds in the backyard got really bold to
Oh.
me eventually. So anyway, so it's one of those things, but also like I was just going to say, for people in baking, sometimes if you do
Mm.
keto baking,
Mm-hmm.
it looks too much like the real thing,
Mm-hmm.
and it can be a bit too triggering for people. But
Mm-hmm.
also it's like one of those things, like with weight loss and struggles with weight loss, that like
Mm-hmm.
lots of times I've thought, oh, I've got a problem with thyroid or adiponectin or leptin, and then when I've actually analyzed what I'm doing, it's like, no, is this you all over? Like,
Right.
it's either,
Right.
and it's one of those things, it's because I've done it all myself and I'm not being
Mm-hmm.
unsympathetic. I can just see it straight away when
Mm-hmm.
people are kind of in denial, or
Mm-hmm.
they haven't given something a chance and they
Right.
already want to start making sweet potato brownies, and I'm like, hang on a minute, that to your brain, that's just too much like a
Stop
real
baking.
brownie.
Like stop baking. Like keep it.
Yeah.
I just want it to be so simple for people because if it's simple, then you can sustain it and you can follow it. All right, I hope you enjoyed hour one of our 2-hour conversation. Next week, obviously, we're going to delve more into nutrition, talk about food, sourdough bread, which is one that has a health halo that Dr. Sara and I don't necessarily think might get might get some unsubscribes and some unfollows after that one, but it is, again, just our experience, what we have seen work the best for people who are trying to reverse metabolic issues, leptin resistance, and feel their best, lose the weight, all of that. So again, make sure you're subscribed so you can get next week's episode. If you do enjoy the show, please head on over to Apple or Spotify to leave us up a 5-star review. And if you are watching over on YouTube, leave us a like, leave us a comment to let us know that you enjoyed the show. We greatly appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you again next week.